The Course Key Stats tool is a statistical breakdown for every golf course with a lot of relevant and pertinent, also actionable data for each and every week. The drop down at the top allows you to choose between the golf courses on the PGA Tour schedule for that year. So depending on what golf course you choose, you'll see that data loading in throughout the tool and allowing you to see the differences between those different tracks. The general information like par, yardage, average green size, and architect will always be available at the top. And then you have a stat breakdown, a scoring average by hole, the par for each hole, and the scorecard yardage. This allows you to tell how many easy holes there are, how many difficult holes there are, is there any birdie opportunities out there or birdie streaks. For example, the way that this reads is number 13. The par 5 at TPC Scottsdale played over a half a stroke under par, which means that would play to about a 4.44 scoring average. The 11th hole being 0.33 over par, that means it would have played to a scoring average of 4.33, and you can see that for every hole 1 through 18. The correlation section is a calculation that looks at the 12 most recent years, if we have it, shot link data, and all the PGA Tour stats that we have for each golfer each year to determine which types of players have had the most success at each golf course. This does not look specifically at the winner or just the players who had success for that tournament in that specific year, because you'll be looking at things like all of the winners putt well, all of the winners hit their approaches well, etc., etc., etc. This builds a mold of a type of player. So it looks at their season-long statistics, where they ranked compared to their peers, and what types of courses and which courses specifically where they were more strongly correlated to success. So the way that this reads is, for strokes gained approach, there are only 14 other courses, because it ranks 15th, in which strokes gained approach was more highly correlated to success than TPC Scottsdale. And that is using the full season numbers for every player on the tour, how they rank in approach, and how they eventually ranked at TPC Scottsdale. Comparing them against other courses is important because you'll always see approach being a highly valuable, highly correlated stat. Tee to green, strokes gained total, these are all highly correlated. And if we were just to rank them 1 through 800, approach would always be near the top, strokes gained total would always be near the top. If you rank them against the other courses, you can kind of see which ones outliers are. The visual is the green shadow being the golf course that you have selected, the black shadow being the tour average for that statistic, which allows you to kind of visualize where each one of these bullets shows you is more valuable or less valuable. Then on the left, these are just more stats. The reason that I've selected the ones on the right is because they're the best stats that we have. The strokes gained metrics, they're not very noisy. Driving distance, driving accuracy, these are very good. Everybody's got a decent sample size. The ones on the left become a little bit more granular, approaches from 150 to 175, early scoring average, things that might be a little noisier, but are worth looking at as well. These are still, approach and driving and scoring metrics. You don't see a lot of putting stats being strongly correlated here. So that's why I like to have this, just to kind of give you an additional idea of some other stats that might find themselves to be highly correlated. The course fit table takes the information from above, how valuable each one of these metrics are, uses that information and each golfer's last 36 rounds in this case, and adjusts their fit. So it says who should fit this golf course the best or the worst based on those metrics above. And because Scottie Scheffler is such a great approach player, he gets a nice boost on approach. He is actually a worse putter than this stat shows, but because putting is not as important as approach play, it does not ding him as much here. So this table allows you to look across and say, okay, who gets the best adjusted fit? The way that this reads is that Scotty Scheffler, compared to a tour average golf course, gets about a 1.75 stroke adjusted fit per round at this tournament. You can see there are 4 golfers above one stroke per round, and others that have a very good history or a very good fit as well. I should not say history at all, because this does not matter if a golfer has played at this golf course or not. It does not mean history. It means based on their metrics, should they fit this golf course? And then you can adjust this. If you'd rather see a larger sample size, if you'd rather see 100 rounds, you'll see these numbers start to update. They'll go through, they'll redo these calculations, and they will give you a new adjusted fit number based on your input. It might take a second or two because this is a lot of data coming through. There you go. So you see this gets adjusted a little bit. Some of the longer term players who have played well get up near the top. Or if you wanted to see something very short term, if you wanted to go ahead and say just the last 12 rounds, you could do that as well. And this will be, some more volatile information because the sample size is smaller, but this is based on your input. The tool will just behind the scenes do the new updated calculations based on the number of rounds that you've given it, and then adjust the fit accordingly. The off the tee section is a real deep dive into the shot by shot information available in the RickRunGood database, breaking down each tee shot that the golfer will hit for each hole. It shows a variety of different factors that will essentially show who is going to separate themselves from the rest of the field. Notice there's no par 3s here. These are just your tee shots on par 4s and par 5s. It'll show the frequency in which fairways are hit, the length of the average drive, the penalty for missing the fairway, and the reward for hitting a long drive. These are important statistical metrics. When you are trying to get to 15 strokes gained over 4 days, which is usually the number it takes to win a golf tournament, these are critical. And when you miss a fairway at some courses, you are in a huge disadvantage. And in other courses, if you hit the fairway, you are getting a big reward. The way that this reads is that on the 5th hole, if you miss the fairway, you are giving up nearly a third of a stroke to the field for missing that fairway. One single shot, you'd be losing a third of a stroke because it is that difficult, and that changes the scoring average so much. On number 1, there is nearly no penalty for missing the fairway. 0.07 strokes. That's nothing. If you miss the fairway there, the scoring averages remain generally unchanged. You'll also note how many driver holes there are. Number 1 is not a hole where a lot of guys hit driver. Average drive is only 265. You'll see holes number 3 and 5, 10, 11, 13. That's where it's really being uncorked. And that's where drivers being pulled most frequently. If you are able to hit a drive longer than the average on that hole, you are designated with a long drive. And the scoring averages are also calculated based on whether you hit a long drive or not. So for example, the holes that reward you the most for hitting a long drive or a drive longer than the average on that hole, hole number 18, that is worth nearly a third of a stroke. Hole number 13, that's worth a quarter of a stroke. So you can see where opportunity lies. Holes in which a long drive is not rewarded, well, of course, number 1. Right? That's why so many lay back. It's why there is not a huge missed fairway penalty. This will take a little bit of time for you to wrap your brain around, but these are important metrics that every golfer on the PGA Tour is looking at, every caddy knows, and they're planning their rounds accordingly. After the tee shot comes the approach shot. Every single hole with its average approach distance gives you an idea of where those shots are going to be coming in from. On the right-hand side, the approach buckets are generated from 100 yards and in to 200 yards and farther out. And the percentage of which shots come from each one of those ranges. For example, from 125 to 150 yards, 19.5% of those shots 19.5% of approaches come from that range at TPC Scottsdale. It is a little more than tour average. From 150 to 75, it is a lot more than tour average. And 175 to 200, again, more than tour average. So those three buckets are the ones that you should be prioritizing. These are not perfect. Approach buckets have their flaws, but when you start to see a trend of three buckets in a row from 125 to 200 that are all above tour average, and you can go hole by hole to see where they're coming from, that is valuable information and should be part of your process. As if we couldn't get any deeper, the putting section does just that. Again, leveraging the shot by shot data that's coming in to the database shows the percentage of birdie opportunities from each putting range. Again, this might take a little bit of time to wrap your head around. So for every birdie opportunity, whether it was made or not, what distance did it come from? 9.6% of all birdie opportunities came between 4 and 8 feet at TPC Scottsdale. Those are very close. Guys hitting it very close to the pin. The average on PGA Tour is much higher, 12.2%. The number of birdie opportunities that are coming from 9 to 15 feet at TPC Scottsdale is 16% of all birdie opportunities. Again, much lower than tour average. 16 to 26 feet, lower than tour average. It is not until you get to 27 feet and to 36 feet in which TPC Scottsdale has more birdie opportunities than the tour average. So what does that say? It is very difficult to hit it close to the pins at TPC Scottsdale, or at least much more difficult than the average PGA Tour course. What do we do with this information? That's the $1 million question, and I have the answer. We take a look at each golfer's make percentage from those putting ranges and the frequency in which we're expecting them to get there. We're putting all of that into a calculation and giving a golfer a putting boost. This is how much they are expected to gain to the field based on their putting alone. Now, Lucas Herbert is getting a quarter of a stroke, 0.24 putting boost. It's the best in this field of guys with a large enough sample size. You'll see there's a lot of guys who don't have a big sample size who are better. That's why I have the sample size integrated into this. So that means that Lucas Herbert, when he gets into these positions from these ranges, outpaces the tour average combined with the frequency in which we expect him to get there, gives him this level of boost per round. And he's already a very good putter. So for example, if Lucas Herbert is already gaining a stroke per round putting, in this situation at TPC Scottsdale, he's gaining 1.24 strokes per round. So that's a stroke entirely over 4 days. Obviously, that can go in different directions. It's pretty significant. It's pretty significant because this is putting is volatile in general, but that is a very significant stat and number to look at. And then you can scroll down and you can see the guys that get much less boost than that, or no boost at all, depending on their sample size or the stats for that week. So the course key stats is just a ton of data that you can use to really attack the field, prepare the golfers that you want to look at, the paths to success, and ways that guys are going to separate themselves from the rest of the field.